Hello and welcome to this WTR Symposium Series. You're tuning into the second podcast installment of Next Gen Vehicles, Investing in Small Drones and Unmanned Vehicles. I'm your host, Shawn Severson, founding partner and CEO of Water Tower Research. My co-host today is Peter Gastreich, Managing Director and Senior Sustainable Investing Analyst here at Water Tower Research. We have a group of senior management for our event today, so let's get started. Peter, could you kick things off and take us through today's company lineup?
Absolutely, Shawn. And if our listeners have not already, please tune into the first podcast of this two-part symposium series, which dropped last week. For that, Dr. John Roy, Managing Director of Technology Research at Water Tower, interviewed management from Micropolis Holdings, Ondas Holdings, SES AI, and Unusual Machines. Now, for the second edition of our WTR Symposium on next-gen vehicles, we are shifting focus more toward underwater vehicles as well as last-mile logistics and software. Along with my technology sector research colleague, John Roy, we will speak with the senior management of ARAI AI, Nauticus Robotics, Ocean Power Technologies, and Palladyne AI. These companies are high growth and with innovative unmanned vehicle solutions focused on improving efficiency and safety for industries as diverse as offshore oil and gas, subsea mining, offshore wind energy, pipelines, defense, logistics, and even CO2 sequestration. From Arrive AI, ticker ARAI, Nirav Shah, Chief Strategy Officer, is joining us. Arrive AI is a platform-based company that leverages AI to automate and enhance the last mile and even middle mile of delivery, bringing faster, smarter solutions to the logistic industry. From Nauticus Robotics, ticker KITT, we have John Gibson, who is President and CEO. Nauticus Robotics develops autonomous robots for ocean industries, including, for example, offshore oil and gas, offshore wind and power, and military and defense. From Ocean Power Technologies, ticker OPTT, we are pleased to welcome Philip Stratman, President and CEO. Ocean Power leverages autonomous vehicles and both resident and persistent buoys that generate their own power. This enables robust data collection for industries like defense and security, offshore energy, and research and science fields. From Palladyne AI, ticker PDYN, we welcome Ben Wolf, who is President, CEO, and co-founder. Palladyne AI is a software company providing an AI platform for robotics. Their software minimizes training by having machines that observe, learn, reason, and act. Palladyne AI enables robots to adapt to new tasks and environments in near real time with minimal human demonstration-based training and sensor-based environmental awareness. Now, just a side note here, Shawn, before we get started. In last week's introduction, we included a few housekeeping notes regarding our format for the symposium, so I'll assume our listeners don't need to go through that again. I will remind, however, that our content at Water Tower Research is entirely open access and can be found on our website at www.watertowerresearch.com. For those with access, investors can also find our content on research aggregators like FactSet and Bloomberg. Finally, we'd love to hear what you think about this symposium format, so please feel free to leave comments, or reach out directly to Shawn Severson, John Roy, or myself on LinkedIn or by email. So with that, Shawn, let's get started. So for our first guest, we're pleased to be joined by Mr. Nirav Shah, Chief Strategy Officer at Arrive AI. Nirav, thank you so much for joining us today. For those who may not be familiar with Arrive AI, can you share a brief background? What are your solutions and the pain points that you are trying to resolve for your customers?
So effectively, we're a platform company. So we're creating a network of asynchronous arrive points that can take deliveries from ground robots, aerial robots, etc. And this platform allows the last mile delivery to actually be a thing and the network to operate because it allows for asynchronous delivery. You have chain of custody, you know what's where in the supply chain. So basically, we're enabling ground robots and aerial robots to do their job and deliver the last mile and even the middle mile in many instances. So we're really cleaning up the logistics space in a sense of providing these arrive points to be the network and the center point for goods.
You know, that sounds kind of like the lockers that Amazon has, the self-service kiosks, perhaps on a much larger scale.
it's similar. I think ours are on steroids. So we have them with drone doors, we have climate control, we have all kinds of chain of custody and IoT capabilities. We're also looking to expand what we can gather. So we've got these great powered devices throughout the country and the world. So we think there's a lot of other applications, other benefits we can provide because we're gathering data and providing useful insights, including a lot of AI data on last mile logistics information. So we're pretty excited. We have edge computing on our units, and so we'll be gathering data at the edge, and then feeding our main server with all of the useful insights, and then basically spooling them up across our network. So we think that that's a little bit more powerful than an Amazon locker.
Yes, that sounds much more powerful. That's great. So when you think of the opportunity set for Arrive AI, how would you characterize the addressable market? What types of customers are you focused on, and who will benefit most from your solutions?
Sure. So right now we have a lot of applications in healthcare space. We're seeing that as a first mover. We're also seeing logistics companies who want to save time and energy in from a climate perspective. Essentially, right now, if you look at delivery drivers, they go to home by home by home. We'd like to kind of disrupt that and make it easier for them. These trucks are driving around our neighborhoods, creating again, environmental issues, safety issues, wear and tear on roads. If they can deliver to a central point, somewhere in a neighborhood, somewhere at the end of the block, then we can have our last mile logistics delivered to the home still. But you're basically taking these big, bulky delivery trucks off the road. So we're disrupting those in front of homes and neighborhoods across the country and the world.
That sounds like a great network to have, disruptive in a good way. For example, I can't imagine many people thinking fewer trucks driving around their neighborhood is not a good thing. But moving on, what needs to happen in the US next to accelerate the market for you?
Sure. So we're from two sides. So, I'd mentioned ground robots and aerial robots. From the ground robotics perspective, we feel very comfortable with the regulatory landscape and the direction it's taking. Now, regarding the drones beyond visual line of sight and FAA regulations, sort of, I think, are holding things back. We're looking at other countries where the regulations are less. So, for example, we just signed a deal with a company in India called Sky Air. They're doing around 200,000 deliveries a year just in the Delhi area. And that's just one suburb of Delhi. And so if we can get to that place, we see drone deliveries skyrocketing in the United States. Again, helping with the last mile logistics, taking bulky gas emitting trucks off of the road. So the regulatory landscape from an FAA would be the main thing to kind of help move things along.
It sounds like the international market may be ahead of the US in certain respects. So let me ask a question there. On that international front, what does the competitive landscape look like, and what markets look the most interesting for you?
Sure. So we see a lot, obviously North Texas, and we see a lot of activity in North Carolina and the US. Internationally, we're seeing India. We're seeing a lot of interest in the Middle East. We're seeing sub-Saharan Africa as well, because you can create this logistics network. You don't need to build traditional roads and highways. You can build drone highways in the sky that don't require the same kind of infrastructure build that a 8-lane highway with trucks and lorries going up and down it. So we're really looking at places that want to kind of leapfrog, similar to how you didn't need a landline, you could skip straight to a cell phone in developing countries. So in that way, we see a lot of activity in developing countries as well.
Yeah, I can see that. In fact, we saw the same thing with broadband in the U.S. because there was so much corporate lines, so that fiber optic broadband just took longer to happen. But when you think of the drone industry, and given how well connected the U.S. is with road and railroad infrastructure and so on, what are the biggest challenges for the small and medium drone industry in the U.S.?
So from my perspective, having come out of the drone industry myself now, obviously in the smart mailbox space, I think keep the sensory technology and keeping that the see and avoid, the detect and avoid, and the UTM communications, making sure that that technology in the sub 55-pound market can be active, very robust. We see this same thing with self-driving cars. You don't necessarily need a LiDAR. You could use computer vision for the see and avoid, and that. So really, it's that sensor technology coming down in price and weight to serve the sub 55-pound market. So that I think is the big challenge.
Okay, thanks so much, Nirav. I'm afraid we're running out of time here, but this has been great. Thank you very much for participating in our event today and sharing what is really a very exciting story. I'm sure our listeners will continue to follow Arrive AI with great interest, and we hope you can join us again for a future event. And with that, it's time to move on to our next guest. So for our next guest, we're pleased to welcome John Gibson, President and CEO of Nauticus Robotics. John, thank you so much for joining us. Let's get started here. So John, for those who may not be familiar with Nauticus, can you share a brief description of the range of technologies and solutions the company provides, and who are your primary customers?
Our largest customers are, at the moment, we're focusing on the super major oil and gas energy producers on the wind market as well. What do we do for those? Well, we're really in the autonomous robotics business, in that we have several different business lines, but really tractable small number. We have the Aquanaut itself, which is a robot that can dive down to 3,000 meters and work on the seafloor. Fully autonomous, no tethers. We do use acoustic communications. We have the software that provides the autonomy for the vehicle, and our software platform is robotics agnostic. It'll run on any robot, so we can run on competitors' robots, and we have. We can run on a number of platforms. So then we have manipulators. And the manipulators are twofold as well. Much like the Aquanaut, a manipulator is the mechanical arms. We have two designs, a 7-degree freedom and a 3-degree freedom. 7-degree freedom gives you complete flexibility. It's much more like a humanoid type arm. A 3-degree freedom, if you wanted to deploy a probe, and we designed that one particularly to reduce the number of moving parts, the mechanical components, so that it would be easier to repair, longer main time to failure, so simplification in order for it to be worked on offshore. The other component with the manipulator is the actual perception software for the manipulator to operate with independently as well. So it doesn't require human interaction. It can identify objects and it can interact with the environment. So we're able to pick up or deploy sensors, whatever would be required by the customer. So and the vehicle itself is a data gathering machine. So think of it as a robot with 22 sensors. 6 of the sensors we use for the autonomy, for the navigation, collision avoidance. 16 of the sensors can be designed by the customer to gather data on whatever mission it is that they have, or whatever opportunity or process they're working on. And so we can actually configure sensors for the particular mission they have.
Thank you, John. That's a great overview. From listening to you about sensors and the robotic arms, fully autonomous, it sounds like you offer a lot of functionality and innovation, and also to a significant depth. So where do you think the biggest opportunities and uses for your technology would be?
Well, there's no question data collection is what most people are trying to do. It's the inspection services and the regulatory compliance that's required for riser inspections, pipeline inspections offshore. But I think what's happening globally is everybody's moving towards trying to do, and they'll call it different things, but digital twinning, and they would like to be able to simulate their business. Any simulation requires input data, and you'd like as much real-time input data as you can. So the deployment of sensors looks like a fabulous market for our type of robot, where you have the arms, the manipulators, and your ability to take a sensor and deploy it in different places, and different types of sensors that might be measuring flow, asset integrity, CO2 leaks, telecommunications capabilities. And so we have a tremendous opportunity with our platform compared to competitors, because it's not just a torpedo collecting data moving in a straight line. We really have more of an aquacopter or a drone. It can stop, hover, and we can place or remove a sensor or gather data from sensors. So the sensorification of the ocean is underway, and I think we'll play a big role in that. And the gathering of high quality data, so that you can identify the seafloor hazards, whether it be methane hydrates or something else. We can do inspections, but we can also look at coral reef health. So there's a lot of environmental opportunities for the vehicle. So we can work in a number of industries. We can work in the oil and gas industry. We can work in the wind industry. We can work in the telecom industry, the midstream pipeline industry, and also in the defense industry. So there's multiple different market segments that the Aquanaut, the software, and the manipulators just have tremendous demand in.
You've certainly got quite a few end markets you can go after, and quite diversified from oil and gas to wind, telecom, defense, and so on. And that's great. If we focus strictly on the US market, what would you like to see happen here that could help grow the market and accelerate adoption?
Well, there's a couple of things. Autonomy, we're just beginning to get accustomed to it in our homes with vacuum cleaners. And that's a great introduction so that you can begin to get that cultural understanding of a robot making decisions and doing things without any human interaction. We're developing that in our automobiles. They're higher speed than what we do with an Aquanaut, but you also have much higher bandwidth onshore than you do offshore on the seafloor. And so, but we still see people wanting a steering wheel in the vehicle so they can control it. So the biggest thing we need to overcome in the US and in the global markets is comfort and cultural adoption of autonomy, and understanding that we can provide collision avoidance that exceeds what can be done by human. And so that's coming, and it's that comfort level with autonomy. On the seafloor, different, but still really important to avoid collisions, to be able to orbit objects and to be able to image them. But I think the cultural changes in the market and customers in general is the biggest hurdle to overcome, because we have autonomy. It's just your willingness to use it is still one of the hurdles.
Yeah, I can see what you mean, that there would be some teething issues in terms of your prospects, getting comfortable and realizing the benefits of your technology. It offers a lot in terms of safety and efficiency, but those benefits, they seem quite clear, but maybe it is just a matter of time for that to be overcome. But turning to markets overseas or the international markets, how would you characterize the competitive landscape? And with my sustainable investing analyst hat on, I'd love to hear more about your opportunities in renewable energy markets and decarbonization.
Well, internationally is to be quite exciting. Still on a course for a lot of environmental investments, and so I think you're going to see continued involvement in called CCS, carbon capture sequestration. One of the best places for you to to do sequestration with carbon is going to be in depleted offshore oil and gas reservoirs. And so those shallow reservoirs where the oil's been removed create a great reservoir to put the CO2 back in. But in order to be able to sequester carbon, you need to be able to monitor it for leaks. And until all of the sensors are deployed to monitor it with an infrastructure on the bottom, you're going to see robotics like Aquanaut that are made available to go and survey those fields so that we can see where the leaks are coming from, using the same technology to do oil and gas leaks on pipelines and other infrastructure. But the CO2 sequestration, I think, is really important internationally. I think, we see tremendous opportunities across all the markets, particularly in the water for Brazil, for Norway, for West Africa, just a lot of different markets on the oil and gas side. The wind industry, Europe is spectacular, continues to invest, and I think that'll be strong as well. And where the Aquanaut is particularly useful there is taking capital cost out of those markets, because most wind farms are near shore, and we'll be able to do that with a combination of small USV and an Aquanaut and eliminate having a vessel, because we can deploy from shore and go out to service those wind platforms with light duty work without requiring a boat. We can find any dock and release the USV and the Aquanaut and have them go out, say 20 kilometers and do the inspection work or light maintenance, and then return. And the real value in that's twofold. One is you're improving production of energy at lower carbon, but you're also eliminating carbon in the maintenance of those facilities. So you're not burning diesel with a large vessel to go out and do the work. So very, very exciting sort of double benefit on CO2.
That's very interesting. I hadn't thought much about the applications of your technology to CCS, but that makes total sense. And we will definitely follow that area closely. So we have a great overview of your technology here and opportunity set. Thanks for that. But now, what would you say are the biggest challenges for the autonomous vehicles industry within the marine space?
Well, I mean, we have a couple of competitors. We take a look at Oceaneering with Freedom. We have a much different vehicle than Oceaneering. It's because we do have the manipulators being deployed, and we are operating tetherless, and we've got a lot of deep water time compared to our competitors today. But they're a good, really solid competitor. And I'd say the biggest risk we have is that ourselves or one of our competitors have some sort of failure. So I think all of us are being cheerleaders for one another. There's so few of these vehicles available in the market, and the demand for them is high enough that I'd like to see my competitors succeed as well. In an emerging market, you want all the people that are in it to be successful, because that's what drives adoption. And we're really at a point where we need higher levels of adoption. We don't, and more excitement about it, and it to permeate out beyond just the early adopters. And so it's crossing the chasm, the old Jeffrey Moore, we need to move from early adopters to early majority. And I think that's the place that we are. And I look forward to all of ourselves and our competitors being successful, is that we get across that chasm and we're into the early majority.
On that positive note, John, I'm afraid we are running towards the end of our time. But I want to thank you so much for participating in our drone and autonomous vehicle symposium.
It's I'm happy to be here. What gives me excitement about Nauticus right now is that last year we had a very small number of customers. This year we have 4 to 5x the number of customers. So that customer concentration is decreasing. That really gets to adoption and people getting comfortable with autonomy. And I think that's happening for us and our competitors. And so I think it's an exciting opportunity to be in an emerging market where there's new technology and new adoption going on. And I think we're the leader at the moment, and we just need to stay there. But we've got some good competitors.
That's great. You've outlined some meaningful growth opportunities for Nauticus in the marine space, and we will look forward to having you come back for future Water Tower Research events, as I know investors will look forward to hearing about your progress. So thank you again. And with that, it's time to move on to our next guest. For our next guest, we're very pleased to welcome Philip Stratman, President and CEO of Ocean Power Technologies. Philip, thank you so much for joining us. So Philip, for those who may not be familiar with Ocean Power, can you share a brief description of the range of technologies and solutions the company provides, and who are your primary customers?
Yeah, OPT is a provider of intelligence solutions for gathering information and delivering payloads out in the ocean. We do that through several product lines that support our go-to-market strategies. So we use autonomous vehicles and resident and persistent buoys that generate their own power to deploy out in the ocean to then collect information for anybody who needs it, particularly in the defense and security space, but also within offshore energy and the kind of the research and science community.
Thank you, Phil. Let's dive deeper into your services. Where do you think the biggest opportunities or uses of your solutions will be?
Well, I think kind of what we've been seeing is I wouldn't even call it steady, but a fairly rapid trend towards acceptance of autonomous systems, be they resident or roaming, out in the ocean. I think global events over the past 2 years have really shown to the world of how much maritime autonomy brings to the national security industry, including defense, and also what it can do in terms of lowering OPEX for offshore energy providers and enabling more rapid, inspection, repair, maintenance type work. In a world that is craving ever more data, without autonomous vehicles and without persistent buoys out there, we're not going to get to the data fidelity and granularity that customers are looking for. And we've seen that in a rapid transformation that has been going on in the industry from, one or two customers and institutions trying these things out to these items being adopted at a large scale.
Got it. So it appears the wave is coming, so to speak. What needs to happen next in the US to accelerate the growth of your market opportunity? For example, there is the significant uptick in the potential for defense spending. How will that affect you?
I'm not even sure it's about increases in defense spending. It is about different allocations of certain spend. The fact that you can go and deploy at large scale, you can call it swarming if you wish, autonomous vehicles, and buoys to that extent, at a pace that can be measured in weeks, maybe months, is a fundamental paradigm shift compared to large scale manned vessels and boats being A, built, then B, commissioned, and then C, staffed. So what we are seeing is that rapid adaptation, within US Navy, and I think we look forward to that same adaptation starting to occur within US Coast Guard in the not too distant future, of unmanned systems being deployed at scale. So yeah, any support that goes into that space is welcome. I think the US is doing a great job through efforts like, the Defense Innovation Unit, other efforts that Navy's got going on. The fact that Navy is standing up its own, unmanned surface vehicle squadrons. I think that all of those are efforts that we're seeing that highlight not just, that there is a future demand, but that there's a current demand that companies like us can start supplying into.
Okay, got it. So it's not about the total defense budget. It's really more a matter of how that capital or that spend is being allocated, and unmanned systems look to be on the right side of that shift. So that is certainly great news. Let's shift to your operations outside of the US. What is the competitive landscape internationally?
I think it's, I think there's plenty of other unmanned assets out there. There's probably less so on the buoy side, but definitely I think on the USV side there are other assets out there. However, there's also an opportunity for a whole variety of assets to be supplied, because an asset that can be out there for longer periods of time, operate in heavier sea states, and carry lots of payloads, like a lot of our assets do, might not necessarily be the asset you want if you want to be loitering for a month to figure out what's, to do long-term measurements. Now, having said that, if you're going to be loitering for a month or longer, putting a buoy into the water that's going to be there, semi-permanently, that's probably also a good option. The other bit that we're seeing is that you need to be very prepared to deal with the environmental considerations and constraints that are placed upon you, depending on where you operate. We've been actively expanding in the Middle East, particularly in the GCC region, and hot weatherization is something that needs to, you need to take seriously. We spend a lot of time and effort on making sure our systems can operate in hot climates, and I think that's really helping. We also play well with others in the sandbox. So it's about collaborating. We can, for example, go out there on our larger assets and then deploy somebody else's smaller assets. We collaborate with companies like Red Cat, where we, during CS Space in Washington DC, I think it was back in April this year, we demonstrated the ability to host aerial drones on top of our USVs. So you can now, you're seeing that force multiplication of assets and efforts happening in that space. And then, other areas that we are keep on seeing a lot of growth in is in Latin America. And I think in Latin America, a lot of it is related to offshore energy and offshore energy security. And again, there are other vessels and other vehicles out there, and we tend to go and work within the niche that we supply into. And that demand signal and market keeps on growing.
Got it. Sounds like a lot of international opportunities for you to focus on. It's been great hearing the overview of your technology and opportunity set. Now, moving to the risks and challenges, how would you characterize these for the autonomous vehicles industry within the marine space?
I think it's a fact that regulation is still trying to catch up with technology. I think the technology is there. We've seen it. Navy uses it. Allied forces uses it. There's plenty of use cases that have been demonstrated and shown in certain parts of offshore energy. Be that work, in Taiwan, be that work in parts of Europe. Lesser extent the US, but certainly Latin America, certainly the Middle East. And I think what is still an obstacle is regulatory approvals for these to become, more accepted standard systems that are operating in the offshore, in the maritime domain in general. And that we still see as a barrier, although it does feel like the regulator is starting to catch up. I see less of a barrier when it comes to acceptance on the customers and client side, because they see the benefit these systems bring. They can for a fraction of the cost of that a manned vessel will cost them. They can go and do the same job. They can do it more effectively, more cost efficiently, and more safely, because they now don't have to put humans out into the ocean. And so they can deploy much more rapidly. So I think that customer acceptance is there. I think it's that final barrier, it's that kind of regulatory approval to make sure that we can operate as seamlessly as our customers would like us to.
That's great, Philip. I'm afraid we're running out of time, so we'll need to leave it for now. Ocean Power has a big opportunity set to focus on with your technology in the marine space, and I know investors would look forward to have you come back for a future water tower research event to share your progress. So we hope you will be back soon, and thank you again. With that, it's time to move on to our next guest from Palladyne AI, hosted by my colleague in the tech sector research team, Dr. John Roy.
Welcome, Ben Wolf, who's the president and chief executive officer of Palladyne AI. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for doing this. This is going to be a great symposium on drones and small unmanned vehicles. So why don't we just kick it off right away? Ben, why don't you just give us like 30 seconds on you and the company and your place within the drone robotics space?
Sure. So again, my name is Ben Wolf, and I'm the president and CEO and co-founder of Palladyne AI. We are focused on artificial intelligence software that makes machines smarter. And that's kind of it, most simply said. We provide software that gets loaded onto either drones or onto industrial robots. Think both machines that are fixed in place or are mobile. And it enables those machines to be able to be far more capable, to do more, and to do more autonomously. Meaning we're taking some of the cognitive load off of the human operator and enabling the machine to think and reason more similarly to the way humans do.
Interesting. So what do you think is the biggest opportunity or use case you see for where you guys are headed? Is it like security? Is it military? Is it, consumer?
So products, as I said, on two different sides of the equation. One focused on industrial robotics, which is primarily about manufacturing, maybe a little bit in kind of the logistics space, but primarily about manufacturing and enabling industrial robots to not just be single-threaded and highly programmed to perform a single repetitive task, but instead enabling these robots in factories to be able to do multiple tasks and to deal with making decisions while they're operating. So if they come across something that is unexpected, the machine can respond to that unexpected thing in the work environment. And most robots can't do that today. So I think manufacturing is a big opportunity, and I'd say manufacturing writ large, whether it's automobile manufacturing, heavy equipment manufacturing, electronics manufacturing, whatever it might be. I think we've got opportunities set there. On the drone side of our business, I think the biggest numbers will come out of all things defense related. You know, the militaries around the world, including the US, are going to be the biggest purchasers of a high volume of drones. And so that's our initial focus, but there will certainly be opportunities when we talk about doing things like infrastructure inspection in the commercial world. I think there's opportunities there. I just don't think the volume is going to be as high as it will be on the defense side, at least for many years to come.
Great, interesting. Now, if you look at the U.S. market, what do you think probably needs to happen next to accelerate? I mean, I know people have described it differently, but how do you see the next big thing that's going to push it even faster?
You know, if you'd asked me that question 2 weeks ago, I would have had a different answer than I do today. One of the things that I would have said 2 weeks ago is that we need to get volume in the industry for drones up, because volume is what always drives innovation, right? The more volume you've got, the more things we can try, we can bring the cost curve down, et cetera, et cetera. I think the White House's and the Pentagon's movements last week that reclassified small drones as munitions, which means a different kind of defense spending can be applied against acquisitions. I think that's going to drive a ton of volume in the US. And that's the kind of goodness that I think we need in this industry, is driving more volume so that we can continue to push the envelope in terms of capabilities and bringing price points down.
Yeah, you get the price down, all of a sudden more applications work.
You got it.
The numbers just work.
And since we are essentially a very smart application that rides on top of either a mobile machine or a fixed in place machine, the more machines that are out there, the more opportunities there are for our software.
So what do you think is happening in the U.S. market with the drone bans? I mean, you talk about not having the Chinese in the supply chain and DJI, it goes in, it goes out. Kind of what's your thinking on that?
Well, we've got some great companies that are manufacturing here in the US with US made components. We've got more manufacturers globally that at least are not manufacturing using Chinese components. They might be components from outside the US, but at least they're not Chinese. You know, I have, because I come from a long history in the telecom industry and the tech industry, I've seen firsthand the real concerns that we've got from a national security perspective about Huawei and other types of vendors out of China. And I think that those are real. I do not think that those concerns are overblown. So I completely understand the desire for the Pentagon in particular and public safety organizations throughout the US to not have to rely on Chinese-made drones or components. I think that creates tremendous opportunity for us. I think that we're just at the very beginning stages of the kind of volumes that we will see. And that's going to really, I think once the US figures it out and we have enough volume and stable supply of components, you're going to wind up with other international players, again, doing everything they can to try and be not incorporating Chinese components, particularly, other than on the consumer side. I don't know, I'm terribly worried about it on the consumer side. But when you're talking about mission critical defense applications, yeah, it's important. And we're going down the right path today.
Yeah, infrastructure, flight controllers, yeah, that sort of stuff.
You got it.
So what do you think is the biggest challenge right now in the drone industry? Just to give you some little thoughts on that, the two that I've heard recently, one was the lack of standards hardware-wise. Another one is, well, we need more investment from growth capital rather than seed capital. What's your thinking on this?
I'll take a little different approach. And of course, we all come at this question from our own lens, right? What we're experiencing on a daily basis. If you agree with me that defense spending is what's going to drive the bulk of the volume, which is what drives the innovation, that means we have to get the DoD focused on the latest and greatest evolution in technologies. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. This industry is moving so quickly. There are so many changes. The capabilities that we see today are different than they were 6 months ago, certainly different than they were 2 years ago. And yet, how do you educate then the policymakers, the requirements writers, and ultimately the acquisition executives at the Pentagon so that they are truly availing their constituents with the latest and greatest technologies, with the right level of testing and being proven in the field? And I think that's where we have a challenge. I mean, we can talk about AI today with somebody at the Pentagon, and they might be, thinking about what AI was 2 years ago, and not so much what it is today. So to me, the education of the relevant marketplace and keeping them up to speed is one of the single biggest challenges that I think we've got.
Well, that's great, Ben. That has been super helpful. We're going to have to wrap it up here. And I really want to thank you for your time and attending this symposium.
Thanks for having me.
So that wraps up the second installment of our WTR Symposium Next Gen Vehicles, Investing in Small Drones and Unmanned Vehicles. I'd like to thank the senior management from today's presenting companies, including ARAI AI, Nauticus Robotics, Ocean Power Technologies, and Palladyne AI. Also, thanks to my equity research colleagues, John Roy and Peter Gastreich, for hosting this two-part symposium series. Finally, a special thanks to the producer and editor of the symposium podcast, my WTR colleague, Joe Brunetto. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe as well as visiting us at www.watertowerresearch.com, where you can stay up to speed on the company's small cap Britain research, podcasts, fireside chats, and conference schedules. As a reminder, we're a completely open access platform. We encourage you to take a look at our research and events. We will see you next time for another WTR Symposium Series podcast. And thank you everyone for listening, and have a great day.